is the 5th day of the month of Menachem Av, and we are learning Daf Vav Amud Beis in Maseches Pesachim. It's worth noting that today being the 5th day of Menachem Av, it is the yahrzeit of the Ari HaKadosh, the Arisal, Zchus Yagam Enel Kol Yisrael. His merit should stand for us and for the entirety of the Jewish people. We left off on Daf Vav Amud Aleph with a conversation that the Gemara was having. Get into the right place here. There we go. The Gemara was having a discussion about the Shloshim Yom that are before Chag HaPesach, vis-a-vis your obligation to search for chametz. Why would it be that the 30 days before Pesach would be consequential at all? What do these 30 days have to do with anything? Says the Gemara, right at the bottom of Vav Amud Aleph, Hani Shloshim Yom, these 30 days, my avid tayu, what is their importance? What's the chashivus? Kidetanya, as the Brisa tells us, Shalom Darshim, Hilchos HaPesach, Kedem HaPesach Shloshim Yom. There is a halacha of Shalom, of asking V'darshim, and saying drushes, of investigating in the halachas of Pesach, Kedem HaPesach Shloshim Yom, for 30 days before Pesach. That is the opinion of the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, Shtei Shabbosos, that one only has this obligation to do so for 2 Shabbosos. Says the Gemara, my time of the Tanna Kama, what is the rationale of the Tanna Kama? And that is the turning of the page. What's the rationale of the Tanna Kama? Shari Moshe Ami Pesach Rishon. Moshe Rabbeinu is standing on Pesach Rishon, Umazir al Pesach Sheni, and he explains the halachas of Pesach Sheni. What exactly are we talking about? Says the Gemara, Shenemar. This is in the 9th parak of Parshas of Sefer Bamidbar in Parshas Bala. It's Shenemar v'yasu v'nei Yisrael es haPesach b'ma'adai, that the Jewish people made the Pesach, they made the festival of Pesach in its right time. And then there were a group of people that said, there were chevra that came along and they said, we cannot bring Chag HaPesach, and we cannot bring the Pesach on Chag HaPesach, and therefore we need some other way of doing it. We need to be able to bring Korban Pesach, if possible, some other time. And Rosh Hashanah explains to them Pesach Sheni. We almost Pesach Sheni exactly a month later. We went from Yud Daled Nisan to Yud Daled Iyar. So you see that before every festival there is an obligation of being shel v'darish in the halachas of that festival for 30 days before. Says the Gemara, but what about Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, what are you talking about? I did the Arabi Mili de Pischa. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them Hilchos Pesach. It's Hilchos Pesach. He wasn't talking about Hilchos Pesach Sheni. It was Erev Pesach, and he was explaining, we're all going to bring Korban Pesach today. So this is Masig L'chol Mili de Pischa. So he ended up talking about all the halachas of Pesach. I mean, it wasn't that intentionally 30 days before Pesach. He was talking about Pesach, and 30 days before Pesach Sheni he was speaking about Pesach Sheni. No, on the contrary, he was talking about Pesach, and then a question came up about Pesach, so he explained Pesach Sheni. So that's why Rabbi Shimon Gamliel doesn't buy the idea that we have to be Shalom Darish for 30 days, but he says 2 weeks. Where does that come from? My time on Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, what is the rationale behind Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion? Shari Moshe Ami Rosh Chodesh. Moshe Rabbeinu is standing on Rosh Chodesh, Umazir al HaPesach, and he explains about the original Pesach, about Pesach Mitzrayim. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, HaChodesh Hazeh Rosh Chodashim. This month is for you the head of all months. That's Rosh Chodashim. Ksiv, and the pasuk says, Dabru el kol adas v'nei Yisrael leimar be'asor l'chodesh hazeh v'yichu lahem ish se leveis avos. Speak to the Jewish people and say to them, on the 10th day of this month, everybody has to take a se lebais. You have to take sheep, and you're going to bring that as the Korban Pesach in Pesach Mitzrayim. And this is all taking place on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. But the Gemara is about to question that. Because the Gemara says, hold up, Mimai de Barish Yarchakai. How do you know that he was speaking about Rosh Chodesh? That he was on Rosh Chodesh? Dilma ba'arba b'yarcha b'chamisha b'yarchakai. I mean, it could very well have been that Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them all of these halachas on the 4th day of Nisan, or the 5th day of Nisan. Who says that it was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Ella Amar Rabba bar Simi Mishmei de Ravina. Says Rabba bar Simi in the name of Ravina Mehacha. We're going to know that fact from this pasuk. Torah tells us, "Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'shana hashinis b'chodesh harishon." Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu b'midbar Sinai in Midbar Sinai b'shana hashinis in the 2nd year b'chodesh harishon in the 1st month. This is the beginning of the discussion of Pesach Sheni that we have in Bamidbar. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, "Vayasu b'nei Yisrael es haPesach b'ma'adai." The Jewish people made the Korban Pesach in their Atan. Hachanami. So also, we can ask the question: how do you know that it was on Rosh Chodesh? Dilma ba'arba b'yarcha b'chamisha b'yarchakai. Maybe it was on the 4th day of the month or the 5th day of the month. Meaning, the Torah wants to, Rav Bar Simi, in the name of Ravina, wants to prove from the pasuk that Hashem spoke to Moshe that is talking about Rosh Chodesh. And the Gemara says, how do we know that that's on Rosh Chodesh at all? Meaning, when is Hashem speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, telling him about Pesach in the 2nd year that we're in the desert? So that was on Rosh Chodesh. Who says it's on Rosh Chodesh? Amar of Nachman Yitzchak. I'll tell you how we know this. Asya midbar. There is a gzeira shava of the word midbar with regards to the halachas of Korban Pesach, Bamidbar Sinai, and the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar. So the pasuk says as follows: Ksiv hacha. We wrote there, Bamidbar Sinai, in Midbar Sinai, Uksiv Hasam, and there, at the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, pasuk says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai ba'el moed be'echad lachodesh hasheni. When Hashem is speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, we know that it is on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, meaning we know that this is 1 month into the 2nd year that the Jewish people are in the Midbar. And there's a hekesh, or a gzer shava, of midbar, ma lahalam Rosh Chodesh, avkan Rosh Chodesh. Just like there, the pasuk says explicitly that he's speaking on Rosh Chodesh. So to here, in the case of Pesach Sheni, that is a month before, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu in Chodesh Harishon on the Yom Harishon, on Rosh Chodesh. So midbar tells you that it's the same place, the same context, within a month. Says the Gemara, "V'nichtav b'reisha d'chodesh rishon." So if this is so, it's not true. And Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to Hashem is speaking to the Jewish people, speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu about the Jewish people bringing Korban Pesach at the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So we should write that at the beginning of the Chodesh Rishon, and then come along and tell us about Chodesh Sheni. Meaning, the Torah seems to be that it's written out of order. Meaning, the pasuk says, "Vayidaber," at the beginning of Bamidbar, "Vayidaber Hashem Moshe b'midbar Sinai ba'al moed be'echad l'chodesh hasheni," the 2nd day, the 1st day of the 2nd month. And we're going to say that was on Rosh Chodesh because it was on Rosh Chodesh. And then we're going to say that when Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu in Perek Tes, that's also on Rosh Chodesh. But then the Torah seems to be writing this out of order. It says, "V'had nechtav l'chodesh sheni." So Amar Rav Menashe bar Tachlifa mishmei de Rav, says Rav Menashe bar Tachlifa in the name of Rav Zois Amaris. This teaches us the famous principle and oft debated principle, Ein mukdam u'mu'achar b'Torah, that there is no chronological sequence to the events of the Torah. Now, this is the only time in Kol Torah, according to the best of my knowledge, that everybody agrees to a Ein mukdam u'mu'achar b'Torah. It happens to be, if you take a look at the Chumash, there are a number of times that the Rishonim will invoke the principle of Ein Mukdam U'Me'uchar B'Torah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Reuben Kukulam, that this is the only time that all of the Rishonim, even the Gemara, explicitly says that these two things are out of order because the pasuk says that they're out of order. Amar Rav Papa says, "Lo amar ela b'trei inyan," but we should contain this principle of Ein Mukdam U'Me'uchar B'Torah, that we can only ever invoke it, we can only ever apply it, b'trei inyan, when it comes to two separate things. Ava b'chad inyana, but if it's the same thing, we're going to have to define what thing means. Ma'id mukdam mukdam, that which is first is first. Ma'id me'uchar me'uchar, that which is second is second. Meaning, the story of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that is very clearly in chronological order, because there's an Avram, there's a Yitzchak, there's a Yaakov. Fine. But for example, the Torah discusses the story of Yosef being sold down to Mitzrayim, and interludes with the story of Vayered Yehuda me'es Achav, that Yehuda goes and has children, and story of Er and Onan and Shelah, and Yehuda and Tamar, and that's an interlude in the story of Yosef. And there's a machlokes in the Rishonim how those two stories fit together, but they are two separate inyanim. So it would be at least fundamentally possible to say a story like that is a separate inyan, Ein Mukdam U'Me'uchar B'Torah, that the Torah is telling you about one episode that overlaps with another episode, and there are chronological facts of the first episode that happened before the second episode, that happened after the second episode. I mean, that's a b'chad inyan. How does Rav Papa know that it's impossible to say b'chad inyan? It says the Iloi Teimahachi. This is a reductio ad absurdum. The Iloi Teimahachi. If you don't think that this principle is limited to Trei Inyane, so then you've ripped apart the whole concept of the Torah, because we have principles like a klal uprat. Sometimes you'll have a general rule in the Torah, and then you'll have a specific detail. And the way that we learn that is ein biklal ela mashe beprat, is that you have a general rule, and then you have a specific, and that specific is coming to limit what the klal is. It's going to tell you a klal like this prat. Dilma prat uklalhu. But if you don't say, if you say in mukdam U'Me'uchar B'Torah, so then who says that this is a klal or prat? Maybe this is a prat or klal, which is a totally different limud. Says Rav Papa furthermore, prat uklal nase klal mosef ala prat. If you have a prat uklal, a specific halacha, and then a general halacha, then the klal is mosef on the prat. Dilma klal upratu, meaning anytime that you have a klal uprat, you could switch that around and turn it into a prat uklal, and the opposite. Ihachi, and if this is so, afilu trei inyan nami. Says the Gemara, if that's true, if that is true that we are concerned with the orders of klal or prat or klal, so afilu b'trei inyan nami. So then we should limit the principle of Ein Mukdam U'Me'uchar B'Torah to two separate sugyas as well. Because sometimes the Gemara will be darish a klal or prat from two halachas that are one paragraph after the other that are listed in the same pasuk. So says the Gemara, Hanich lemanda amar klal uprat, ha'meruchakim zemize ein dan nazai bichlal uprat. This opinion of Rav Papa makes sense according to the shita that says that if you have a klal uprat that are very far from each other, that are broken up, so that those two things that we don't apply the halacha of klal uprat. Shopper, that makes sense. Ella lemanda amar danim, but according to the opinion that says that we do, meaning if you have two separate dinim that are far from each other, you can still learn out a klal prat or a prat to klal ma'ika lemeimar. What are you going to say about that? You can just apply principle of Ein Mukdam U'Me'uchar B'Torah. So he says, I feel lemanda amar danim. Even according to the person that says the shita that says that you are allowed to, you are supposed to be able to learn a klal prat or a prat to klal from dinim that are separated by many psukim. So hani mili b'chad inyana. No, that is still talking about one inyan. It's still one thing. The psukim are still talking about the same thing, even if they have things in between. But if they're two separate dinim that are broken up by many psukim, by many prakim, by many parashas, ain't done. Meaning there is a limit. It's a question of where that limit is. Perhaps within the same parashas, perhaps within the same psukim, perhaps within the same topic that the Torah is talking about. There is some limitation called chadinyana and treyinyana that would limit even klal pratim meruchakim that are distant from each other. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, to a separate topic, but one that comes up all the time. Once we've spoken about klal prat within the halachas of Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, that was our interlude to know that 30 days before Pesach you don't have to go checking for chametz unless you are intending of coming home, and then we wanted to know how we know 30 days and what the chashivus is. Says the Gemara quoting Rabbi Yehuda Marav, the person that checks for chametz also needs to do bittul. So we discussed at the beginning of the Masechta the obligation of doing b'dikas chametz, and we said, well, why do you have to do b'dikas chametz? You could just do bittul chametz. You could just nullify the chametz, and we discussed the machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos that either you have to do b'dikas chametz in order to make sure that Shema Yimtzah Gluska Yafa, maybe you'll accidentally find a wonderful big piece of chametz, and you'll say, wow, I'm crazy that I didn't find it, but it's a great thing because I'm saving this for after Pesach. And now you have violated Bal Yirah Bal Matzah. You've retaken ownership of it. Just by doing, if you only do bittul, you have to do bedika to make sure that you have found all your chametz, so that you don't end up violating Bal Yirah Bal Matzah. And the opinion of the Tosfos is that it's making sure that you don't end up eating chametz, that you have to search for the chametz so that you don't end up eating chametz, that you might just pick up and say, wow, must be kosher Pesach because it's in my house. Says the Gemara the opposite question. Now that we have this institution of bedikas chametz and beer chametz, you also have to do bittul chametz? Why? I'm going to check, I'm going to burn it. Why do I also need to be mevatel? My timer. What is the rationale behind it? If you want to say it's because the little crumbs, halachashivi. No, that's not. Those are important. Those are not important. Those, by definition, are going to be batel. Rashi points out here, my time, you're going to be burning everything that's chashuv. So, meaning the little crumbs, we assume that you're mevatel anyway. Hold on, who says that you are automatically mevatel them? You mintalu agav beise chashivi. Everything in your house, you're not mevatel. If it's in your house, you assume that it's yours. So it's minter agav beise. You are holding onto it because you're holding onto your house. Any crumb that you find in your house, you're going to assume it's yours. And therefore, maybe that's going to upgrade the chashivas. You're not automatically mevatel. Vatanya, we have a brisa. Seifei te'inim, the ends of the figs. And you're still watching your field because you want to make sure that your grapes are going to be protected. Or Sofer Anavim, the ends of the grapes, meaning the last grapes that are on the vines. Said, but you're still watching your field, mipnei mikshos, mipnei midlos. But you're still watching because of the cucumbers and the pumpkins and the gourds. So it's the end of the season of one fruit. The next fruit is coming in, and you're still watching your field. There's a couple of grapes on the vine. There's a couple of figs that are on the tree. Those are not the dregs at the end. Says the Brisa Bismanche Balabais Makpid. Well, if the Balabais is makpid on them, meaning he cares about them, every now and then he's going to go pick a cluster of grapes that is not, it's inferior. It's not great quality. He's not picking and putting the soil, but he still wants it. Every now and then he's going to take it so that he can have a snack while he's working on his figs or working on his gourds. Asur mishum gezel. Then they are asur for any regular Joe to come along and take, because that's gezel. And the balabais, the balasada is still going to be chayiv in meiser. on these fruits. But if the balabais does not care about them, he's already finished the grape harvest. It's done. It's over. Now he's on to the next thing. So a random guy can go through. He can take it from the vine as long as he has permission to be there. Otherwise, that's breaking and entering. Right? Yeah, trespassing is also also. But one of the workers can come and say, random contractor that's doing something else in the field. He can come. He can take it. No problem. Mutar mishum gesel, the mutar u'ptur mishum meiser, and the potter from meiser of the balabais, even if he wants to take some for himself. Meaning, at this point in time, there's a question of whether or not he cares about it. Says the Gemara that what's this proof? Is that even if something is in your property, and even if you are watching that property, you're mishamer that property. If you don't care about it, then it's batel, meaning that you have automatically ceded your ownership over it. You don't care what happens to it, and the same thing would be true about the crumbs. Amar Rava. Therefore, Rava says, Gzeira, what's the rationale that you have to do? It's batel all by itself. What is the rationale that you have to do bittul when you're doing bedika? Gzeira shema yimtza gluska yafe v'date iluye. You have to do bittul chametz. Why? Gzeira. This is an institution that Chachamim insisted on. Shema yimtza gluska yafe. Maybe you're going to find a gluska yafe, a nice piece of chametz at some place, some point, and you think about it. And you think about it, and therefore you are now going to in the middle of Pesach. You're going to think about it, and now you're going to own it. Now you're going to own it. Meaning, you checked for chametz, you got rid of chametz, but there was one piece of chametz that you didn't see. You didn't destroy, you didn't get rid of. And it's not batel. It's not batel because it's not something insignificant. It's not a crumb. It's not something that you would automatically assume is garbage, and therefore, unless you specifically wanted it, it doesn't belong to you. Maybe it's something good. Maybe it's something valuable. Maybe it's a bottle of scotch that you totally forgot that was in your travel bag from vacation. That Taka, I was keeping this thing. You did bedika. And you did and you did beer, but what about the bottle of scotch that you brought back from vacation? It says, no problem. When you find the Chalamayid Pesach, be mevatel it. This is a question that we get halach l'maisa every year, right? Hopefully not practically halach l'maisa, but at least theoretically halach l'maisa. Rabbi, why can't I just be mevatel my chametz in the middle of Pesach? Because maybe you'll find it after the Zman HaIsur. And what's the problem of finding it once there is man ha'isur? So it's true. I have a prohibition of eating chametz. I have a prohibition of owning chametz. So let me be mevatel it now. Let me be mevatel it now. Says the Gemara, no, you cannot be mevatel it now. V'lav b'rshusei kaima, because it's not in your rishus. Means it is no longer in your jurisdiction. What does it mean? It's no longer in your jurisdiction. The Torah has decided. It's gzeirus hakasav that it's not yours. And therefore you cannot be mevatel it. Meaning you own it, but it's not yours. The only thing that you own it for is for violating the Isur Bal Yirah Bal Yimatzeh. The Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Elazar, Shnei Dvarim Einem Rishus Shel Adam. There are two things that are not yours. But the Torah made it as if it is in your control, in your jurisdiction, meaning that you are chayev because of your ownership of them, even though you don't have ownership over them. Ve'elohim, and they are bar b'rishus harabim, a pit in a public place. V'chametz mishei shos mala, and a chametz from 6 hours in the day on Erev Pesach and onwards. What's this halacha of bar b'rishus harabim? So if a person goes and he digs a pit in the middle of the street, so the halacha is that he's chayev on those damages. But a bar is a fascinating thing because it's not yours. In fact, it's not anything. It is the absence of earth in a particular spot. A person cannot claim ownership over it. It's a public place. So a person digs a well, digs a pit in the middle of a marketplace, digs a hole. So that hole, who does it belong to? It doesn't belong to him because the earth doesn't belong to him. It's not his property. Nevertheless, the Torah made it as if it is yours. You're chayav because of those damages. The same thing is true, says Rabbi Elazar, with regards to the chametz on Pesach from 6 hours on Erev Pesach and onwards. That is something that is not yours. You don't have any rights to use it, to do anything with it. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, nothing. But the Torah said, "Now you're chayav because of it. You cannot be mevatel." Says the Gemara, maybe maybe you could be mevatel it in the 4th hour, the 5th hour. What's this question? Is we said that when you do bedika, you should also do bittul. You should do bedika and you should do bittul. Both of those things are things that you should take care of. So why do you have to be mevatel it when you do bedika on the night of the 14th? You should be mevatel it whenever you want in the morning of the 14th, the 4th hour, the 5th hour. I get it. From the 6th hour you can't. Since the Gemara Kevin the lavzman isurhu, since it's not yet the zman of the isur, the lavzman biuru, and it's not yet the time of getting rid of it. Dilma pasha mevatel it. Maybe you're going to end up messing up and not being mevatel it. Meaning there's no event that's causing you to be mevatel it. And our minhag, the way that we paskin, is that we mevatel both at the bedika and at the beer. But in the middle of the day, there's no anchor to hold you down to be mevatel it. We will continue with Daf Zayin Amud Aleph tomorrow morning. Great to see everyone, and thank you for learning with me. Have a beautiful day.